All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of How Not to Burn Toast, Christmas Cookies. So we're going to talk a little bit about the best part of the holiday season, cookies, and show you what we made because I like making cookies.
Yeah, I like making cookies too. It's definitely something that's fun when you're at home and it's really dark outside, when you get home from work, and just putting some cookies in the oven is really calm and cozy, and it's good for this time of year.
Right.
But we chose this as our topic for December because I don't know about you, but my family doesn't do anything different than just make a whole new Thanksgiving dinner on Christmas. So if you would like to make another Thanksgiving dinner for Christmas, you can watch last month's video.
Right.
And we give you a whole bunch of tips about making a Thanksgiving dinner. But Christmas cookies are just fun to give to people, make for yourself, and yeah.
And we didn't do the normal, sorry, it's opposite of what I am, normal Christmas cookies. I believe you did a chocolate chip cookie, which is a normal cookie, but there's so many ways you can do it.
Yeah.
That I always like seeing how people do theirs versus how I do mine. And I did two types. One, which is a family recipe, a very long and tried tradition in my family. And then one, which is what I call a new family recipe, which is something that I make that my library family loves.
Yeah.
So there'll be some new ones, and we hope you try them, just like we hope you tried our Thanksgiving recipes, which I know some of you did because I talked to some of my coworkers who did. So let us know how they turned out or did not turn out for you, because sometimes that happens. Because we love to hear what goes on with the recipes we give you. And if you have your own cookie recipes and you want to share them, please share them, either in the comments or on our Facebook page, or even send them in through our questions. We do check that.
Yeah. So a lot of people make Christmas cookies to gift for the holidays, and some people don't make Christmas cookies. They may make sweet popcorns or
Fudge.
Fudge is really good too. If you have good fudge recipes, please leave them down below. But sometimes cookies are just fun to give to others. I know when I made my batch of cookies, we're filming this after we filmed our individual portions. I just took my cookies over to my parents' house, and they really were excited about that.
Mine came here.
Yeah.
And I think they're mostly gone. So
yeah,
that's
I think
good.
most of them are all eaten up.
So normally at the library we do a Christmas cookies exchange party, but this year with the pandemic and things like that, we're trying to help out by social distancing and keeping our germs to ourselves. So we're not doing an exchange this year. So maybe an idea for doing a COVID Christmas cookie exchange is just exchange the recipes.
Oh yeah.
Because that's the best part of it, I think. I mean, you get to try the cookies, but even just having the recipes is what I'm really looking forward to. Because I've gotten some really good ones from our coworker Jill. She makes the best. Well, she makes the best everything.
Yes.
But she has some snickerdoodles that I absolutely love, and I normally do not like snickerdoodles.
Yeah.
But they have a couple of secret ingredients in them, and I do have the recipe. Maybe I'll share it.
Yeah.
And it's just fun because we all have our own traditions, based from where we're from. Like I'm from the Midwest, you're from out here. So we cook differently, we bake differently, and there are different flavors that scream Christmas to us. So it's always just fun to see how people do their Christmas cookies.
Yeah. And maybe you already have a group that used to do cookie exchange parties every year. Maybe get together on a Zoom and email each other the recipes, and then you guys can still get together and talk about them at the same time.
And watch someone else eat cookies.
Yeah, watch someone else eat your own cookies as you're at your Zoom
and
party.
Describe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great way to expand your food palette language.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to do is freeze cookie dough. And I actually got this idea a long time ago from my grandma, Leah, who normally watches these videos. So, hi, Grandma.
Hi.
She always used to make cookie dough and roll it into logs and wrap it in plastic wrap and foil and stick it in her freezer.
That's actually
so
really smart.
Right? When you when you have kids or people coming over, you just pull it out, slice them off, just like those slice and buy cookies that you don't admit you like to eat the cookie dough. Oh, yeah. And then you can just bake them off right then. You can also, if you have a cookie scoop, especially with chocolate chip cookies, these are great for them. You just put them on a pan, stick them in the freezer, and then you can put them in baggies and put them in there. So your cookies are now ready for
extra baking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, my phone's vibrating or playing music, so I need to turn that off. Just a second.
Don't play music. But also, I talked about Austin, and I didn't record it, but we were talking yesterday when I was making my cookies about, did you guys in the Midwest ever have like the cookie drives where you would buy like cookie dough?
Yes!
That was like a big thing at my elementary school, and he said that the Boulder City schools did it too. But I really like to freeze my cookie dough because it's almost like it's cookie drive time again.
Right?
And it's like having the pre-frozen kind of like pucks of cookie dough already ready in your freezer. It's always really nice. And I mentioned this in my portion of the video that I don't always bake a whole serving of cookies, like the whole 24 or however much a cookie dough recipe makes.
Right.
Because there's only 2 people in my household. So I'll make half of it, we'll eat a couple, and then I'll take the rest to my parents, and then I'll freeze the rest of it. But I normally just shove it all into a Ziploc bag without any rhyme or reason, because then I'll just defrost it in the fridge. But
yeah, if you scoop them out and put them on a tray, you don't even have to defrost them. Or if you roll them up, you can just stick them. They just take a little bit longer to bake, so you just have to watch. You can also, and we have a bunch of books on this because I love this. I am a notorious cookie dough eater. It runs in my family. I have to give the, health safety thing. Don't eat raw cookie dough.
Because of the eggs.
And the flour.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people get salmonella from raw flour. However, we have lots of books on edible cookie dough. And you can make edible cookie dough very easy. And you toast your flour. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, toasting your flour gives it a nutty flavor. So even in your regular cookies, try toasting your flour. You might get a whole new flavor. But yeah, check out some of our cookie dough books and make yourself some cookie dough if you're not a big fan of the actual
baked cookies. Yeah. And that edible, I forget the exact title, but the edible cookie dough book that we have, that's maybe she'll put in a graphic here in my hands.
We'll try to find which one.
It has like a pink cover, and it's a really great just cookbook in general. It has a lot of really nice ideas for cookie dough.
Yeah, and some of them you can actually bake off. Too, so that's also nice. So you can have like a cookie dough cookie sandwich.
Yeah.
That kind of makes my stomach hurt.
Yeah, that makes my stomach hurt too.
So one of the things I think that is, and I talk a little bit about in my video, because I grew up in the Midwest and we didn't use butter. I know that sounds really weird, but we didn't use butter. I actually have a dairy allergy intolerance, and my little niece has an actual allergy. So dairy was never big it was big in my family, but for some reason not butter. We had margarine. So my family cooked using vegetable shortening, baked using vegetable shortening for almost everything. So there is a difference in consistency in your doughs when you use vegetable shortening versus butter. And there's a whole big scientific thing in there. Butter spreads a little bit more. It does add a little bit more flavor because there are lovely flavorful fats and normally salts in there. Yeah. Vegetable shortening tends to be a neutral flavor. So if you don't want a big flavor in there, you can easily normally substitute vegetable shortening. And they have butter vegetable shortening. It kind of tastes like butter. Not really, kind of.
It's not the real thing.
It's not the real thing. I just made a pie crust with it, and I'm like, not quite. But it does make a softer cookie and a cookie that stays softer longer. Now, yeah, I know, right? If you want a crisper cookie or one that spreads, very much use butter. And recipes will tell you to use room temperature. They'll tell you to use, I grate mine sometimes when I'm making like shortbreads.
Yeah.
Or they'll tell you to use melted butter. And depending on which one you use, you will get different cookie textures.
Yeah.
But we have a handy dandy little, and we'll share it, little
We have some graphics.
She'll
pop these on the screen.
We found on the internet that kind of explain, and we'll link out to some of these, that explain if you mess with your egg ratios, your flour ratios, different types of flours, different types of fats, you get a different product each time.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. Different flour types. I mean, there are so many flour types.
Yeah.
And gluten-free.
Yeah. So if you want to get really scientific with your cookies and make your pinnacle family cookie recipe, you can play around with those too.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was one more thing I wanted to talk about, and now I just totally, it went, whoo! I can't remember. I don't have it written down. But if I do remember it, I'll add it in.
Baking in low humidity?
Well, yeah, so out here, I'm from not only sea level, I'm from an area which is almost like always above like 50% humidity and gets really cold. Michigan. Hi, Michigan. So baking out here is a little bit different. That's what it was. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was. Baking out here is a little bit different for me, especially if I mean, my family is one of those bake by feel kind of people, and I'm notorious for doing that, so I don't do all the scoop your flour in and level it off. I scoop it out of the bag with my measuring cup, and it's bad. I'll tell you, because you normally end up putting too much flour in there.
Yeah.
If you can use weight, use weight. Buy yourself a little $10 scale. You will get much better products out of it. But the flour out here tends to be drier than it did at home. So you normally need a little bit more moisture, and what it leads to is chill your dough.
Yeah.
Sometimes overnight. Not only do your flavors meld together, especially if you're using a lot of spices, it will prevent your cookies from going in flat and crispy.
Yeah.
Unless you're looking for flat and crispy, then go right ahead.
Yeah.
But I found that if I chill my dough overnight, or even just for an hour or so, the flour hydrates, you get a better product, and you don't get cookies the size of your head.
Yeah.
Again, unless that's what you're looking for, because there are some cookies out there that are supposed to be crispy, and you may like crispy cookies. I mean, depending on what kind of mood I'm in, I like overdone cookies versus soft cookies sometimes. So that is my big secret, and the secret to my family's molasses cookies, which will be in the video coming up next, is chill your dough. Keep it cold, keep your fat cold, and you will get lovely soft cookies.
There's also the fact that you can do it in like steps as well. Like maybe one night you make your cookie dough, and then the next night you can bake half your cookie dough, and then the next night you can eat all of the rest of the frozen cookie dough in the freezer. And then, but I mentioned that in my portion of the video that I like doing it in steps because most of the time I'm baking after work and after making dinner, so I don't want to like spend another hour and a half in the kitchen.
Yeah, and normally it's later at night. You don't want to eat the entire batch of cookies at 10 o'clock at night, Sam, which I may have done. So I hope you enjoy our family cookie videos, and you try them and you share yours with us.
Yes.
Now, we're not going to do an ending to the video because we really don't. Do we need to do an ending? No, we're going to do it now. So next month, we thought about, because this year has not been good. And it may continue for a little while longer, but it's going to be a new year soon. So we want to put a new spin on some comfort dishes, because I have cholesterol issues and need to keep that in check. And a lot of us have been taking comfort in things that may not be the most healthy for us, but they do make us feel better. Like macaroni and cheese. It's so good. I love cheese and noodles. So we're going to do New Year, New Food, which will be new ways to view comfort food, new ways to make comfort foods that may be healthier, you may have never thought of, like putting cauliflower in your mac and cheese, which actually is really good, by the way. Or, say you're dairy free, making mac and cheese, and just how might you do that? So we're hoping to make some new and healthier versions of foods that might help you get through what hopefully will not be much longer of a major pandemic.
Yeah.
And if you have any ideas or any foods you'd like to see if we can find a healthier version, please send it in and we'll do our best. We do like to research and we do like to eat and cook, so we'll always give things a try. They may not pan out, but we'll give it a try. So that's our cookies. And we hope you enjoy and have a good holiday season, whatever holiday you do or do not celebrate. And we hope that 2021 is a much better year for everyone. Yeah. So stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next year.
Yep. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye. Hi everyone, and welcome to part of the cooking portion of How Not to Burn Toast. Today we'll be making 2 different types of cookies. They're family recipes. They're ones that always show up on the cookie tray in my family, and I find that they're probably something most people haven't had. So the first one we're going to make is called Molasses Cookies, and there's actually a card, an old school recipe card for it. Molasses cookies are a lot like a gingerbread, they're a little bit softer and they have a darker flavor because we use molasses. You may not be used to this. It's a sweetener that was used lots in ye olden days because white sugar is really expensive. And I actually grew up in a town whose primary industry was sugar. And most of the sugar that we eat, this sugar, brown sugar, does not come from sugar cane. It comes from beets. So that was the main industry in the town that I grew up in. And let me tell you, sugar processing stinks horribly. But back to molasses. Molasses is a short sweetener. So we call white sugar a long sweetener because the sweet lasts on your tongue a lot longer. Molasses is very dark, so it doesn't. It's got a bitterness to it. If you've ever had brown sugar, which I'm sure you have, brown sugar is just refined sugar mixed with molasses. Back in the old days, it used to be a step on the way to refined sugar, but now we actually end up adding molasses back into it to get brown sugar. Really weird. But Molasses Cookies, these were Sarah's, and she was a family friend, and she was the best at everything, apparently. I did not get to know her when she was still baking, but the best compliment you could get in my family was taste just like Sarah's. So we're going to try to taste just like Sarah's. So there's another interesting thing that's in these cookies that most people will not be used to. I didn't eat butter growing up. My family did not use butter. We were margarine people. So everything that most people would make with butter, we used vegetable shortening. So these cookies use vegetable shortening. I still use vegetable shortening even though I now eat butter. Why? Because I feel that it makes a more tender cookie. There are certain cookies you can't do, or certain things you can't do without butter, like sugar cookies or shortbread cookies, because it needs that butter in it. However, if you are dairy intolerant, like my niece is, you can find Crisco that's flavored like butter. And I will actually use that later today because we're cooking with Crisco today. Shortening, excuse me, brand names. So I'm starting with, let's see, 3/4 cup of shortening in my handy dandy mixing bowl. I'm sorry, my KitchenAid mixer has been through everything. So it's a little beat up. It's missing its orbiter ring, but it still works. They're expensive, so not getting a new one. So we're going to start with our shortening. Don't forget to lock. And we're going to start mixing it up with the sugar. This is called creamy. And sugar is actually considered a wet ingredient because of its hygroscopic nature. So what I'm trying to do is get a nice light and fluffy consistency. Basically the sugar's punching holes into the fat, and this will help make my cookies have air in them, because the only rising agent in my cookies are baking soda and technically an egg. So we're just going to let it wet for a little while. And I'd say the biggest mistake most people make when making cookies is they do not cream long enough. When you're making like chocolate chip cookies, your butter needs to cream for like 10 minutes. You know, we normally just go, oh look, it looks integrated, but that you miss a chance to add air to your cookies. So let this go for a little while and we'll be right back. Now let's see, my mixer's been going for a while. Look at that, nice and fluffy. Kind of almost looks like frosting. And I'm gonna scrape my bowl. Get all this stuff off of my spoon. Then I'm gonna add my other liquid ingredients, which is 1 egg. Want that mixer. And then finally the namesake, molasses. If I can get the top open. If your molasses top ever gets stuck because molasses is really sticky, just run it under some hot water. It will loosen it right up. Ta-da! So 1/4 cup of this. And you're noticing I'm using the same measuring cup that I put the Crisco in, because then it's lubed. So the very sticky molasses comes out much easier. So I'm gonna have to scrape it out. This stuff is really sticky. Oops. Okay, now I'm going to turn it up again to mix this all together. And we'll scrape down our bowl. Always scrape down your bowl. Otherwise things won't get incorporated right. You can see the white is still in there, so it's not quite all incorporated. Alright, so my bowl over here, I have all the dry ingredients. So we have flour. There's, I believe, 2 cups in there. We have the normal suspects of salt. We have baking soda. That's the one in the box, not the one in the can. We have ginger, a very holiday spice. Cinnamon, also holidays. And then this brown stuff are cloves. And if you haven't seen cloves, they look like this. You can buy them ground. I buy them whole because I can grind them myself. You can either use like a coffee grinder or go old school. This is a mortar and pestle. I got it at IKEA. Really nice to have. In fact, I actually have 2 of them. So now we're going to incorporate our dry ingredients a little bit at a time. And I like to mix them all together like this. First of all, it saves time because you're not trying to figure out how much of what you need and then accidentally putting too much in. But it helps it incorporate it easier when you're pouring out of a bowl instead of a mixing cup. Or a measuring cup, excuse me. I do have those too. So now, I'm just going to mix until everything looks incorporated. Nothing's dry. This is a really sticky, kind of wet looking dough. Okay. And this is step 1 of molasses cookies. What is step 2? Overnight in the refrigerator. That's a mistake most people make, is they don't chill their cookies. And that's why they end up being
flat, like, and crispy. I chill these for 24 hours, which is why mine is different than everyone else in my family, because no one ever did that. So I'm going to move them into another bowl because I only have one mixing bowl. And then tomorrow we will go over how to shape these, which is a ball, and then you roll them in sugar before you bake them. So this is Molasses Cookies Day 1. Okay, as we can tell by the different lighting, this is day 2 for cookies. These are the molasses cookies that we were making yesterday. So you can see I've already actually started portioning them out. What you do is line your sheet tray. You don't want to have to scrape these off because you do roll these in sugar. So I just make a little ball. If you have a fancy cookie scoop, you can go ahead and use that. And I just drop it in sugar. I also dropped my phone in the sugar earlier. Don't recommend that one. You'll notice it is a little crumbly, so you do have to stick them together. Why is it crumbly? Because it looked really sticky yesterday. It's because the flour had a chance to hydrate overnight. That's why when you make pie crusts, you should always leave them for at least an hour. It gives the chance for flour to soak up all of the moisture. Okay, so now I have a tray. This should make between 3 and 4 dozen, depending on the problem that I had as a kid, which was my family would come and eat the cookie dough. Hopefully you can get about 3.5, 4 dozen out of this. And we'll do a little magic. One goes in the oven. And ta-da! So the big issue with these cookies, other than the fact I squished one a little bit, the big issue with these cookies is they're already brown. The dough's brown, so it's really hard to tell when they're done. So they should crackle just like this, and they should just get brown around the edges. And you'll have to leave these. You notice they don't spread a lot. Leave these on the tray for a few minutes to cool down and kind of solidify, and then move them onto a cooling rack. So you can tell they're a little soft. They're very moist inside, which I love. If you like harder cookies, you can obviously leave them in longer. You notice they're just a little brown on the bottom. You don't want too brown. Over caramelized is not always good. But these are literally my favorite cookies, and I'm so glad I got to share them with you. So we made molasses cookies and these lovely guys. And I hope you try these recipes out. They'll be linked in the video. And I did just eat some of that bacon. It is really good. And if you have any cookie recipes you'd like to share with us, we're always more than willing to give them a try. So I hope you guys have a good Christmas and do lots of baking. Okay, and here's our second cookie. This is one of my most requested at library events cookie. It's a maple bacon shortbread cookie. So all the great things all together. So shortbread cookies are pretty easy. They just normally use butter and sugar and flour and a little pinch of salt always. And that's it for a shortbread cookie. These are a little bit different because we're going to be using liquid gold. Look at that. This is bacon fat from bacon I rendered down, which will also be going in the cookies. And we're also going to be using real maple syrup. None of the Aunt Jemima, none of the log cabin. This is the real stuff. And actually this is fancy real maple syrup. I've actually made maple syrup before. It is a lot of work. But you can go and buy it at Costco or Trader Joe's. So first things first, we're gonna get our creamed mixture together. So this is 6 tablespoons of butter. And then we're gonna add in 2 tablespoons of our liquid gold. And you can save the rest of this for something else. Just put it in your fridge. So now I'm going to turn my mixer on and let this whip up. There is also 1/4 cup of the maple syrup. This stuff, yum. And 3 tablespoons of sugar, which is white sugar, in there. Okay, so we're nice and whipped. You can see it kind of changed color. It kind of looks like maple butter now, which is kind of what we're going for. So in here is my flour, only 1.5 cups, and cornstarch, which is a different ingredient. You normally don't see it in cookies a lot. It's a stabilizer, but it helps these cookies stay together with the bacon fat, because normally you want cold butter and solid fat when it comes to shortbread, so that they're nice and crumbly. And then there's just a pinch of salt in there. Pinch is about 1/8 teaspoon. And I'm going to add in something that's not in the original recipe. This is an extract. I'm only going to use a 1/4 teaspoon, but it's maple. And it adds some maple flavor, because most of the time when we're getting maple syrup, we're getting fancy maple syrup, like I believe it's called grade A, and it doesn't have as mapley as a flavor as the stuff that I made growing up, because it's been refined more. So if you can find a grade B amber, they're really good. Really taste like maple. So I'm going to stir this in just for a second. And then I'm going to add in my dry ingredients. We're just going to let this mix up for a second. You'll probably think it's really dry looking. It's supposed to. Shortbread is a drier cookie because it's short, crumbly. So really you just want to mix it until it goes together, because you don't want to form gluten, which is what you want when you make bread. So now the bacon. So you're going to want to put in a ton of bacon. It says to make 6, I believe, 6 strips of bacon. I was using double cut too, so it's nice and thick, and hold back some for sprinkling on. So I've added in a nice portion of bacon, and then I'm just going to mix it throughout. Ta-da! Bacony goodness. Get this off. This is a really sticky dough, by the way. Super sticky. And then we're going to move everything to the side, because we're going to pat it out in a parchment lined. There we go. A parchment lined sheet tray. So we're going to scoop this all out, get all that bacon out. And no, this does not make very many cookies. It makes about a dozen, so I recommend doubling and tripling the recipe when you're making it. It works just fine to double and triple. And you're going to press this down. Try to make a rectangle if you can. It makes it a lot easier when you're cutting it later. So you're like, oh man, how are you going to get any cookies out of that? That makes like 2 cookies. These are very rich. You're cutting 1 inch by 2 inches. So, I mean, you're cutting a cookie about this big. So, not as big as your normal giant cookie that we're used to as Americans. Okay. So now this is going to get covered with another sheet of parchment and put into my fridge for ½ an hour, where it's going to set up, because you can see it's kind of oily and we don't want that way in the oven. And then we'll slice it up and stick it in the oven. Okay, So our cookies are all done and they're cooled. So these took about 20 minutes in my oven. You notice they're brown, but they're not like rock solid. You don't want rock solid cookies or too brown cookies. That means you burn them. Over here we have a nice little glaze. Kind of looks like a donut glaze, huh? It is brown sugar butter, maple syrup, of course, some cream, and just a little bit of powdered sugar. So we're going to dip these cookies and bake in them. So I'm just dipping them in a little bit and then putting some bacon on the front of them to finish them up. If I have leftover glaze, I may go back and prettify them. But really, that's that simple with these cookies. Sometimes you have to take the bacon out. It gets a little sticky after a while. And there you go. Maple bacon shortbread. Yum, yum.
Hey everyone, this is Kayley for my portion of the December How Not to Burn Toast cookie video. In my little portion, I'm going to show you how to make two different kinds of holiday cookies. The first is just my basic brown sugar cookie or chocolate chip cookie recipe, and I will leave the recipe for it linked down below. But I think that this is a really good classic cookie recipe because not everybody likes maybe gingerbread or any of the other like holiday staple cookies. Don't tell Sam, but I don't really like gingerbread cookies that much. But these brown sugar cookies can be dolled up in any certain way so that they're not just the basic chocolate chip cookies. You can add different kinds of chocolate chips. You can add butterscotch chips, different nuts, anything that you like in them. They would even be kind of more festive if you added maybe like red and green M&Ms, but I didn't have any of that. I just used what I had in my pantry. And then the next cookie that we'll make is a lemon cookie made from a lemon cake mix. So if you find lemon cake mixes, this one is a Duncan Hines brand, but I'm sure Pillsbury or any of the other generic brands have a lemon cake mix as well. This is just what I could find at Smith's last night. But it is a simple recipe using just a lemon cake mix box, some oil, and a couple of eggs, and then that makes you a nice batter for lemon cookies. And those ones are my brother's favorite for around the holidays. So I will insert some footage of me making those cookies here, and I hope you guys have a wonderful time baking. Okay, so first up we're going to look into my chocolate chip cookie dough recipe. So this is one day after I let this chill. I'll add in some footage of me making this last night.
For this chocolate chip cookie recipe, you want to start out by combining the dry ingredients. So you'll see here I'm measuring out 2 cups of flour with an additional 2 tablespoons of flour. Next, you will add 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then for the wet ingredients, you'll start with 1 1/2 stick of melted butter, melted and then cooled, 2 eggs, 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, and then 1 full cup of brown sugar. I'm just using my half measuring cup here, so I do it twice. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I like this Mexican blend vanilla. And then I whisked together my dry ingredients before I mix together my wet ingredients. Now, about 1/3 at a time, I'll mix together the dry ingredients with the wet ingredients so that we don't get any lumps of flour. Now that this is all mixed together, I'll check the consistency, and then we can add our chocolate chips. In this case, you can add any kind of chocolate chips that you would like. I just had some that were left over from previous baking, so you can add just a little bit of dark chocolate chips if that's all you have, and then I had some white baking chips as well. And then we also had some walnuts that were left over from making banana bread during the pandemic, so I thought I'd add those as well. But you can add anything to these cookies, like I mentioned before. You can add M&Ms, regular semi-sweet chocolate chips, or whatever your little heart desires. Maybe Reese's Pieces would be really good in this as well. Then you mix it all together, and then you'll want to cover in saran wrap and leave it in the fridge for either 30 minutes to an hour, or I like it best leaving it overnight.
So for this cookie dough, I really like for it to chill in the fridge overnight. I think that is what gives it the best consistency when you roll it out and stick it on your baking sheets to bake. The recipe does say that if you just want to make cookies that day, you can put this dough in the fridge for up to 30 minutes to an hour, and that's okay too. Sometimes if I'm also in a rush, I'll stick it in the freezer for a little bit too. I don't know if that messes with like the rate in which the dough chills or how the butter consistency goes, but I think that normally these turn out really well, but for the best results I would stick it in the fridge overnight. Plus then it's only like 5 to 10 minutes to make the dough one night, and then 10 to 20 minutes to bake the cookies the next night. So it's kind of, you can do it in batches and have a slower process. So what's really special about these cookies is the tactic in which the blogger rolls her cookies, in which I found this recipe, and I'll leave the exact link to her recipe below as well. So these are a cafe style cookie, which, I mean, I don't really buy cookies when I'm out and about. I just make homemade cookies. But the idea to make sure it has an extra chewy center is to get your cookie, this one's a little big. I usually go for about like an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter for my cookies. But so you take a little ball, roll it up, and then you rip it in half and then just smush it back together. And then set it with the seam, kind of facing up. So this is our seam running through here. And then when they spread out, they kind of, I know I always say they get craggly bits, but not craggly bits in the way of maybe like a biscuit, but they have like these like bumps, and they're really, really awesome. So I will go ahead and continue to make my cookies. We're going to set our oven at 325 degrees, and then these will bake off for about these will bake off for about 12 to 15 minutes. Just depending on how well you like your cookie done. And for every cookie, I'm just doing the same process. I'm using my spoon to scoop out like an inch and a quarter sized ball, ripping it in half and spooshing it back together. Cookie dough is also really great for freezing. You can do this process that I'm doing right now ahead of time, stick them in a baggie and freeze them. Or you can just stick this whole mixture in a baggie and freeze it itself. I know when I lived at home, I used to make maybe a half batch of cookies and then freeze the rest of the dough, so that whenever I wanted cookies again, I could just bring it out and stick them on a baking sheet, or wait for the dough to defrost and then roll up some cookies. But my mom and my brother love cookie dough, so sometimes that cookie dough wouldn't last very long in the freezer. So just keep in mind, if you have little cookie dough monsters in your house, you may have to hide your cookie dough in the freezer. Okay, so that sheet pan is done. I gave them, this is my smaller sheet pan, so we only fit 8 on here, but I gave them enough room so when they spread out to be fully fledged cookies, they'll be able to have fun on the pan. And they'll touch each other a little bit because there's lots of butter in this recipe, but they're very delicious. So off camera, I'll do this next pan and then I'll pop them in the oven. Again, that's a 325-degree oven for about 12 to 15 minutes. And then while we are waiting for those to bake, we will start on our lemon cookies. Okay, so now we're moving on to our lemon cookie recipe from a box of cake mix. So for this, you'll just need 1 box of cake mix. All right, so we got 1 box of lemon cake mix in there. Then we will add 2 eggs. A 1/3 cup of oil. I'm using canola oil because that's just what we have in the house, but you could use vegetable oil or any other baking oil that you normally use. And then 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. This is lemon juice that Austin makes every week. And it's just freshly squeezed lemon juice that we keep in the fridge, but you could use like the little squeezy bottles that you can find at the grocery store as well. But so 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And then we'll give that a mix. And the blog that I did read this recipe from, she updated her recipe in 2018, saying that some different cake mixes don't have as much flour as they may have used to in the past. So she recommended that if you don't think your consistency is right, is to just add a couple more tablespoons of whatever cake mix that you may have lying around the house. I have this golden butter cake mix, but you could add like a yellow or a white, just a couple tablespoons to make sure your consistency is right. But we'll see how that works here. I only have the 1 yellow cake mix from Smith. The mailman just came. Thank you, mailman. Love our postal workers. So if you can see, as I'm just mixing it together, it seems pretty good. It's pretty dry, but all of that cake mix is hydrating into a batter, a cookie batter. I'm gonna swap to a spoon now. Let's see. This still seems a little runny, so I am gonna follow her advice and add maybe like 1/8 cup of the yellow or the golden butter cake mix, which 1/8 cup converts to 2 tablespoons. But I'll just eyeball it because my tablespoon over there is wet from the lemon juice. So adding a little more cake mix. Let's see how that goes. Okay. So this is what my dough is looking like now. It is stiffened up. I think I added probably maybe 1/3 cup or even 1/2 cup of the golden butter cake mix to make sure that it was kind of stiff enough to become cookies. So hopefully this will work out. Remember, it's okay if you mess up in the kitchen, as long as you keep trying. So we'll see if this works out. I haven't made these cookies for a couple of years. So we're going to take this mixture and we're going to just make little balls. We're looking for like 1-inch sized cookies. We'll just pull off them on the pan and see how this goes. Actually, that looks pretty okay. They're kind of coming together now that I'm spooning them out. Alright, so these are our little lemon cookies, and these will go into the oven. It'll go into a 375-degree oven for about 6 to 7 minutes.
And here are some pictures of the final cookies. The chocolate chip cookies turned out chewy, just like they always do, with that technique where you rip them in half and squish them back together. And for the lemon cookies, I made an icing to drizzle on top with just some powdered sugar and lemon juice. If you try out these cookies, let me know what you thought. Give us a comment down below or comment on one of our social media pages. All right, thanks for baking with me.